Hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah. His truth is marching on. I have seen him in the watchfires of 100 circling camps. They have builded him an altar in the evening dews and damps. I can read his righteous sentence by the dim and flaring lamps. His day is marching on. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Glory.
That song is so moving. That particular version of the Battle Hymn of the Republic was recorded for our movie, for Saving Lincoln, by Dave Alvin, an incredible musician. And I remember when we were recording it in Mark Adler's studio, who was our composer on that film. I mean, I was crying in the studio, and I get really shaken whenever I hear it. If you actually Google Dave Alvin, Battle Hymn of the Republic, there's a little video that I made where the visuals are vintage photographs from the Civil War. And the soldiers who fought that this country should have a new birth of freedom, as Lincoln famously said a little later at the Gettysburg Address. But on this date, July 3rd, and tomorrow, July 4th, there was the 3-day battle at Gettysburg. The turning point of the war was going on at this time. And so many boys went to die in that war. We should never take our liberties in this country for granted. We should never take this country for granted. We're so grateful to be living in the United States of America. For all its problems, there's no perfect in any country, and certainly not this country. And yet, it's so great. And I'm so grateful to be here. And I say that as an immigrant who was born in another country. We left Chile when there were political problems in Chile. My family survived the Holocaust on my mother's side. My father's side fled the pogroms in Ukraine over 100 years ago. It really is a privilege to live in America, and I'm mindful of that on this Independence Day weekend. There is no class tomorrow on the 4th of July. We have a family commitment, so that our next class will be on Tuesday, and so we're getting a little head start on the 4th of July commemoration here. Let's light up the darkness. And who is with us on a Sunday, July 3rd? Shandor in the Bronx, Nancy, North Carolina, James in Indianapolis, Stephen in New Hampshire, Bill in mid-Missouri, Melissa in Great Neck, Moses says Shalom, Bella in Florida, Ruth in Kentucky, David in Indiana, Tom in PA, Patrice in Utah, Leah in LA. Zach Plotzker, my man, in Las Vegas. Iris says hi. Moses is in Missouri. Rob in Massachusetts. Gail in Davis, California. Yosef checking in from Massachusetts. Umberto from Albuquerque. John in Maine. Lewis, which is actually Karen in Northern California. Welcome, everybody. And over there on the YouTube side, Marjorie checking in from Georgia. Great to have you all with us. We've got a very rich daf, page 118 here in Tractate Yevamos, the 14th volume of the Talmud. These are the laws of levirate marriage, and we are close to the end. Today, with God's help, we're finishing chapter 15 with 4 Mishnas, all on today's daf, and it's not an especially long page. And so then when we come back on Tuesday, we'll do a double, God willing, to get caught up. That'll be pages 119 and 120 on Tuesday. That makes Wednesday 121. And Thursday is page 122, the final page of this tractate. So get ready for a CU on Thursday. Bring your favorite beverage to make a l'chaim as we celebrate completing one of the more difficult, more challenging tractates, this 14th volume, Yevamos. All right, chapter 15, Mishnah number 6. We pick that up at the very bottom of page 117b. Let me get this in front of me so I can monitor. All right. If two women who were married to the same man, okay, so ancient times, we haven't had a man being permitted to have two wives for 1,000 years, but these laws were mostly 2,000 years ago. So if two women were married to the same man, and they came forward, and one of them says that the husband died, and the other one says he did not die. So the one who says he died may marry on the basis of her own testimony, right? Because a woman can testify for herself as a single witness that her husband died if she's the only one who saw it, and then she may remarry based on that testimony in most circumstances, unless the couple were quarreling before they left on this journey, or they went to a place that was at war, or certain other limitations where her testimony is not believed. But generally speaking, we believe a woman who says her husband died and allow her to remarry based on that testimony. If she has a co-wife, a rival wife, who says, no, he didn't die, we set that aside. Why? Because we already established that the testimony of a rival wife, right, who could be in a feud with her co-wife, as it were, is set aside. So the wife testifies for herself, my husband died. The fact that her co-wife says, no, he didn't, we set that aside. And the one who said, my husband died, she's allowed to remarry. And she takes the money of her marriage contract. And the one who said her husband did not die, their husband did not die, she may not remarry, and she does not take the money of her marriage contract. That seems pretty logical, and that is the law. If one wife says he died in a normal manner, and the other one says he was killed, so they both agree the husband died, but their testimony is contradictory in the manner of death. One says, for example, he got sick and died. The other one says he was killed in an accident or murdered. So in that case, Rabbi Meir says, since they contradict one another on the facts, these women may not marry, neither one of them. Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Shimon say, since they both agree that he is not alive, they may marry, despite the fact that they dispute the circumstances of the husband's demise. And if a witness says he died, and a witness says he did not die, or one woman says he died, and another woman says he did not die, so then this woman may not marry. Right? And so we had a question. So because on the testimony of a single witness, she may remarry, although she risks that the husband will come back, and then she'd have to leave the second husband. But if a single witness comes and says he died, and another single witness comes and says he didn't die before she remarried, so then she may not remarry. And there's a question, well, if she went ahead and married before that testimony came, does she have to leave the husband? No. If she went ahead and remarried after the second witness came and said the husband did not die, right? So there was contradictory testimony before she remarried. May she stay married? Probably not. Now the Gemara, we're on page 118a. The Mishnah taught that if one rival wife says their husband died while the second maintains that he did not die, the one who says he did not die may not remarry. And the Gemara infers the reason is that the second co-wife, the rival wife, said explicitly he did not die. Right? Why would we allow her to remarry when she's saying about her own husband he did not die? From which it may be inferred that if she was silent and said nothing, then she is permitted to marry based on the testimony of the first. No. However, the conclusion is problematic. This conclusion is problematic as there is a principle that one rival wife may not testify on behalf of another. And if so, how can she rely on the testimony of her rival wife? Right? See, if both of them say the husband died, well, first of all, that's two witnesses. But if one says he died and the other one is silent, okay, the one who said my husband died, she can rely on her own testimony and remarry. Why wouldn't her co-wife be able to also remarry? Now that her co-wife has been freed and can go remarry, you would think the co-wife can also remarry. But the problem is, for the purposes of establishing a death on the testimony of a single witness, we don't rely on the testimony if 5 women are excluded from that, and one of them was the co-wife. So the Gemara answers that this inference is incorrect. It was necessary for the Mishnah to state he did not die, as it might enter your mind to say that this man did in fact die. And with regard to that, which she says, the co-wife says he did not die, perhaps she intends to ruin her co-wife, her rival wife. And as for herself, in other words, the husband did die. The one who saw him die says, my husband died. I want to be free to go and remarry. The co-wife says the husband did not die. Maybe she knows that he actually did die, or maybe she doesn't know whether he died or not, but she's still going to testify that he did not die. Why? Because she hates her co-wife and doesn't want her co-wife to be able to be free and go remarry and get on with her life. Isn't she, destroying her own self by saying the husband didn't die? Now she's trapped. If the husband actually did die and is never coming back, and now she's saying our husband didn't die, just so that you can't go and remarry, but she herself cannot go and remarry. Who would do that? Somebody who is obsessed with hatred, somebody who's consumed by hatred of her co-wife, right? And as for herself, why would she do that? Because she says, let her die with the Philistines, speaking about herself. And this is a paraphrase of the verse, let me die with the Philistines. Do we remember where that verse is from? In Tanakh, in the Jewish Bible. Judges 16:30. Who is the speaker? Samson. Right? Samson was a judge of Israel with the tremendous strength because his mother swore even before he was born that he would be a Nazir all the days of his life, never cut his hair. Not that everyone who doesn't cut his hair has superhuman strength, but Samson did. And he made war against the Philistines many times and saved Israel from them. But unfortunately, the secret of his strength, that long hair, he revealed it to Delilah, who betrayed him. They cut his hair, they captured him, they blinded him. He sat in a Philistine prison, and they mocked him. They brought him out to dance and entertain the court, this former enemy who was such a terror to them. But meanwhile, his hair grew back. And then, even though he was blinded, when they brought him out to entertain them during one of their big holidays, big Philistine holiday, like their 4th of July type of celebration, where all their most powerful, the creme de la creme of Philistine society was gathered in some kind of a massive temple. 3,000 of the richest, most powerful people among the Philistines were all in this place celebrating, and they brought out Samson to mock him and entertain them. But he asked the boy who was, taking him to his spot, show me where the columns of the temple are. Some say he was chained to them and he pulled, or he was between 2 columns and he pushed. But at any rate, he brought the columns tumbling down, and because of that, the temple collapsed and all 3,000 of the Philistines died. And on that day, he did more damage to the Philistines than he had when he was in his prime. All the Philistines that he had killed before did not add up to as many as he killed that day. But of course, he himself died too. And so that becomes a paraphrase, a little bit like a Louis XIV, right? Après-moi le déluge, right? I'm sorry, that's a different phrase. It means something different. But the point is, I don't care if I destroy myself as long as I can destroy you. Right, that is somebody consumed with hatred, and they're saying that a co-wife might do that, and that's one good reason to set aside the contradictory testimony of a co-wife. New subject, the Mishnah taught that if one wife says he died and one says he was killed, Rabbi Meir says that they contradict one another, and neither one may remarry. The Gemara asks, and let Rabbi Meir also disagree in the first clause, when one witness says the husband died and the other claims he did not die. You would think that Rabbi Meir, when he says neither one can remarry, because one says he died and the other says he was killed, when one says he died and the other one says he did not die, also neither one could remarry, according to the opinion of Rabbi Meir. And the Gemara, and Rabbi Elazar said, actually, this is, I'm contradicting the Gemara, and let Rabbi Meir also disagree with the first clause. And Rabbi Elazar said, this is taught as a dispute among Tanaim, the rabbis of the Mishna. In other words, Rabbi Meir did disagree with the first clause. And the unattributed opinion in the Mishnah is that of Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Shimon. And Rabbi Yochanan said, you can even say, actually, that the first clause is in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Meir. As in this case, even Rabbi Meir concedes that any claim of he did not die with regard to testimony enabling a woman to remarry is not considered contradictory, so that we should not make an agunah. But Rabbi Meir would say, but when their facts are wrong, about this death, I don't know. I think the majority opinion makes more sense in this case than Rabbi Meir. The Gemara raises a difficulty with regard to this answer. We learned in the Mishnah, if one witness says he died and the other witness says he did not die, or if one woman says he died and the other woman says he did not die, he may not marry. So granted, according to the opinion of Rabbi Elazar, the unattributed statement in this Mishnah is in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Meir, that when a rebuttal contradicts the original testimony, one cannot rely upon the testimony that the husband died. However, according to the opinion of Rabbi Yochanan, this is difficult. And the Gemara answers, yes, this is difficult. And that ends the Gemara on Mishnah number 6. Mishnah number 7. In the case of a woman who went, she and her husband, overseas, and she comes and says, my husband died, she may marry. And she takes her marriage contract based on her own testimony, right? We've already seen this principle. And it remains prohibited for her rival wife to remarry, as a woman cannot testify on behalf of her rival wife. So same idea, that here the rival wife isn't contradicting the testimony of her co-wife, the one who comes and testifies, but nevertheless, the co-wife is not free to remarry. This is just tragic. Right? So if the husband goes on a journey and he goes with one of the wives and the other wife stays home, and then the wife who traveled comes back and says, during our journey, my husband died, our husband died, so the one who testifies, she's free to remarry and receive the marriage contract. The one who stayed home, she's not lying, she's not doing anything wrong, but because the only witness to the husband's demise happens to be her co-wife, and we can't use the testimony of a co-wife to free a woman to remarry, so the one who stayed home is stuck. She cannot remarry. If the rival wife was an Israelite woman who was married to a priest, she may continue to partake of teruma, right? If the man who died, the husband who died, was a priest, so the two women could eat teruma, consecrated food, on account of being married to him. The one who comes back and says, our husband died, she's free to remarry, and certainly now she no longer eats teruma. The one who stayed home, who is not permitted to remarry, she continues eating teruma because she has the status of still being married to a living priest. It's consistent to say she may continue to eat teruma since she cannot remarry. But it's a little weird that this woman continues to eat teruma because she's married, presumably has a status of being married to a living priest, while her co-wife has been freed from that marriage because he died, and she can go marry someone else at the same time. It's an odd outcome. And this is the statement of Rabbi Tarfon. Rabbi Akiva says, this is not the way to spare someone from transgression, right? If we want to be careful with our rabbinic decrees, the reason to make rabbinic decrees is to spare people from coming to violate Torah laws. So according to the opinion of Rabbi Tarfon, there is a concern that this woman who continues eating teruma because she can't rely on the testimony of her co-wife that the man died, but if the guy really is dead, then she is committing a transgression every time she eats teruma. Now, there is no remedy for this situation, according to Rabbi Akiva, unless it is prohibited for the rival wife to marry, as she cannot rely on the testimony of her rival wife, and it is also prohibited for her to partake of teruma, lest the other woman was speaking the truth. In other words, the law needs to be stringent on both counts, according to Rabbi Akiva. The one who stayed home, okay, she can't remarry because she can't rely on the testimony of co-wife, but neither should she eat teruma in case it was true that the husband died. Now, the Mishnah discusses a similar case. If a woman said, my husband died, and afterward my father-in-law died, she may marry and take her marriage contract, but it is prohibited for her mother-in-law to remarry. Right? This is the single woman testifying that my husband died and his father died. So, can her mother-in-law, the wife of her husband's father, rely on that testimony so that she can go and remarry? No, because we already had the principle that you can't rely on the single testimony of your mother-in-law or of your daughter-in-law with regards to death of a husband. So if the mother-in-law was the daughter, and if the mother-in-law was the daughter of an Israelite married to a priest, she may continue to partake of teruma. This is the opinion of Rabbi Tarfon, and Rabbi Akiva says this is not the way to spare from transgression. The way to do this would be that the mother-in-law is prohibited to remarry, and also she's prohibited to eat teruma because her husband might be dead. That's Mishnah number 7, the Gemara. I wonder if there's something wrong with my office. I feel like my voice is fine all day, and then I get on the air, and for the last few days I become a little bit hoarse when I'm on the air. I don't know why. All right, Gemara. The Mishnah states the dispute between Rabbi Tarfon and Rabbi Akiva with regard to two apparently identical cases. The Gemara explains, and it is necessary to state both of these examples, as had the Mishnah stated the dispute only in this first case, I would have said it is in this case that Rabbi Tarfon said that the wife is suspected of lying because the suffering is physical, i.e. she is jealous of her co-wife, with whom she shares her husband. However, with regard to the mother-in-law, where the suffering is merely verbal and not physical, they don't share a husband. They might not like each other, but they don't share a husband. So one might say that Rabbi Tarfon would concede to Rabbi Akiva, i.e. that she is not considered a liar, and therefore it should be prohibited for her mother-in-law to partake in teruma. And vice versa. Had the Mishnah stated the dispute only in this second case about the mother-in-law, I would have said it is in this case that Rabbi Akiva said that the mother-in-law must refrain from eating teruma in case the daughter-in-law is not lying. But in this other case of the rival wife, you might say that he concedes to Rabbi Tarfon that she may eat teruma, as a rival wife is certainly not telling the truth, or is certainly more capable of lying. Therefore, it is necessary for the Mishnah to state the dispute in both cases. Rabbi Yehuda said that Shmuel said, the halacha, the law, is in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Tarfon. We won't permit the co-wife or the mother-in-law to remarry based on the testimony of the one wife who said that her husband died or that her husband and his father died. But for that other one who remains possibly married to this dead man, because she can't rely on the testimony of her co-wife, we will permit her to keep eating teruma, and that's the law. Abaye said, likewise, we too learn in a Mishnah on page 118b, if a woman came and said, a son was born to me overseas, and my son died, and afterward my husband died, she is deemed credible in all regards, and she enters into Yibum. If she said, my husband died, and afterward my son died, which means she's exempt from Yibum, she is not deemed credible. And we'll explain that actually on the other side of this same page later today. So the Mishnah adds, but in any case, the court is concerned about her statement, and she must perform chalitza, and she does not enter into yibum. In other words, the court takes into consideration the possibility that she might be lying, but she might be telling the truth. We're not going to set aside the testimony as if it never happened. We're going to have to go a little bit stringent on both sides, says Abaye. So Abaye infers from the language of this Mishnah on the B side of today's page that it is with regard to her own statement that the court is concerned. And this indicates that the court is not concerned at all about the statement of her co-wife who testified with regard to her. So the Gemara concludes, learn from here that this is the case. 118b, Mishnah number 8 here in chapter 15. In relation to the dispute is in relation to the dispute between Rabbi Tarfon and Rabbi Akiva in the previous Mishnah, in which Rabbi Akiva states that one must avoid a possible transgression. The Mishnah cites two similar cases involving other topics. With regard to one who betrothed one of 5 women, and he does not know which of them he betrothed. How does that happen? One way is maybe they were betrothed when they were children by their parents. They grew up separately. Now he comes back, right? And it was one of 5 sisters, for example, that he was betrothed to, and he's not sure which. So it could happen. So he betrothed one of 5 women, and he does not know which of them he betrothed. And each one of them says, he betrothed me. So if he does not want to marry any of them, he gives a bill of divorce to each and every one of them, so that none of them will have the status of a woman with regard to whom there is uncertainty whether she is divorced, right? One of them was really betrothed and requires that bill of divorce, so she's free to go remarry. The other 4 were never betrothed, but the fact that they received the bill of divorce as a safety isn't going to hurt them, except that I think they won't be able to marry priests because they have a trace of being a divorcee. And he leaves the marriage contract among them and departs. If he's deciding to divorce, it's his choice. He has to pay the ketubah that he made when they were betrothed. But to whom does he owe it? Right? Only to one of them. 5 of them claim they were betrothed to him. But so he just leaves the amount of the ketubah payment and says, "You guys work it out. You know, I understand that I owe the money. I'm not sure who I owe it to. You guys work it out." And this is the statement of Rabbi Tarfon. Rabbi Akiva says, this is not the way to spare someone from transgression, as perhaps the woman that he actually betrothed will not receive the money to which she is entitled, because the other ones, will argue so forcefully, or they're going to end up splitting it 5 ways, or somebody is going to, somehow hire the better lawyer and she's going to end up with the money. So the one who actually deserves the money doesn't get it. So the only way to remedy this situation, according to Rabbi Akiva, is that he gives a bill of divorce and the full ketubah payment to each and every one of the 5 women that he's not sure which of them he was betrothed to. And likewise in the case of one who stole money from one of 5 people, and he does not know from which of them he stole, and each one says he stole from me, so he leaves the stolen money among them and he departs, and they will decide among themselves how to distribute the money. This is the statement of Rabbi Tarfon. Rabbi Akiva says, this is not the way to spare him from transgression. If he's a thief who's made teshuvah, he wants to atone for his theft, and he wants to return the money, presumably plus the 20% penalty. So, but to make sure he makes the full atonement, he has to return that amount of money to the 5 people who all claim he stole from them. He should know who he stole from. He's the thief. The fact that he's not sure who he stole from, it's on him to make sure that he makes restitution, so he pays that amount to each of the 5 people. It costs him 5 times as much, but that's going to be the only way to make a proper teshuvah in that situation, according to Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Tarfon says, no, just leave the money that he owes to one of them among the 5 and let them work it out. That's the Mishnah. Gemara. The Gemara infers it is taught in the Mishnah that he betrothed one of 5 women, whereas it is not taught that he had sexual intercourse with one of 5 women, as a different ruling applies in this case. Similarly, with regard to the second case, it is taught that he stole from one of 5 people, and it is not taught that he purchased an item from one of 5 people. If so, whose opinion is expressed in the Mishnah? It is not in accordance with the opinion of the first Tana, and it is also not in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar. And the Gemara explains, as it is taught in a Baraisa that Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar says, Rabbi Tarfon and Rabbi Akiva did not dispute the case of a man who betrothed one of 5 women, and he does not know which of them he betrothed. As everyone agrees in this case that he leaves the money with the marriage contract among them, and he departs. So the way what we understood to be Rabbi Tarfon's ruling, Rabbi Akiva agrees with that. They agree. Where do they disagree? With regard to the case of one who betrothed one of those 5 women by having sexual intercourse with her. Right? So that is an inappropriate way to become betrothed. It works, but it is the inappropriate way according to rabbinic law. According to Torah law, it works. But according to rabbinic law, it is licentious. The sages said you don't do that, right? The way to betroth is, to get engaged, to give her an item of value or a document of betrothal. But if he did it through sexual intercourse, okay, they are betrothed, but it was the inappropriate way to do it. If he did it that way, and now he wants to, and he's not sure which of the 5 women he had sex with, okay, so Rabbi Tarfon says he gives a bill of divorce to each of them, and he leaves the money of the ketubah among the 5, and they work out who actually gets the money. And Rabbi Akiva says he gives a bill of divorce to each of the 5 women and the full ketubah payment to each of the 5 women. Since he married in an inappropriate manner, the sages penalized him by compelling him to pay all the women, according to Rabbi Akiva. Likewise, Rabbi Tarfon and Rabbi Akiva did not dispute the case of one who purchased an item from one of 5 people, and he does not know from which of them he purchased it. Everyone agrees in this case that he leaves the price of the purchase among them and he departs. Where do they disagree? With regard to one who stole from one of 5 people. As Rabbi Tarfon, and he's not sure which he stole from. So Rabbi Tarfon says he leaves the stolen money among them and he departs. And Rabbi Akiva says he does not fulfill his obligation unless he pays the stolen money to each and every one of them, so that he's sure that he made the one he stole from, he made whole. And the other ones just got lucky. The Gemara states, from the fact that Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar said that Rabbi Tarfon and Rabbi Akiva do not disagree with regard to the case of one who betrothed and one who purchased, one may learn by inference that the first Tana, with whom he disagrees, holds that they do disagree about the cases of betrothal and purchase. Whereas with regard to the one who had sexual intercourse and one who stole an item, Rabbi Tarfon agrees with Rabbi Akiva, right? According to this view, it's they disagree in the case of one who betrothed in the regular way, or who purchased, and he's not sure who he betrothed or who he purchased from. According to this view, they disagree on that case. Rabbi Tarfon says leave the money and they work it out. Rabbi Akiva says pay each of them. But Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Tarfon would agree in the case of one who right? that they do disagree about. Oh, I'm sorry. That they do disagree about betrothal and purchase. Rabbi Akiva says pay everybody. Rabbi Tarfon says just leave it. But they agree that in the case of one who did it through sex, he pays all of them. Or in the one where he stole, he's not sure which, he pays all of them. So the Gemara elaborates: if the Mishna. Right. So in one view, right, Rabbi Tarfon is so lenient that even in the case of one who had sex or stole, he still doesn't make him pay everybody. Whereas Rabbi Akiva is so stringent that even in the case where the guy acted appropriately, that he betrothed properly through a document, or he just purchased, he didn't steal, and he's just not sure who he owes the purchase price to, even in that case, Rabbi Akiva would make him pay everybody, whereas Rabbi Tarfon would just say leave the money and let them work it out. So the Gemara elaborates: if the Mishnah is in accordance with the opinion of the first Tana, let it teach the cases of betrothed and also purchased, but not that of one who stole or one who had intercourse, as the first Tana maintains that Rabbi Tarfon agrees with Rabbi Akiva in those cases. And if it is in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar, let it teach the cases of one who had sexual relations and the one who stole. So because Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar holds that Rabbi Tarfon and Rabbi Akiva disagree in the case of one who had sexual relations, but not in the case of one who betrothed one of the women. And likewise, he maintains that they disagree in the case of one who stole and not one who purchased. But it seems like our Mishnah is a mix of those views. So the Gemara answers, actually, the Mishnah is in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar. And what is the meaning of the term betrothed in our Mishnah, Mishnah number 8, here in chapter 15? It means that he betrothed one of the women by means of sexual intercourse. And the Mishnah taught the term betrothed to convey to you the far-reaching nature of the stringent opinion of Rabbi Akiva. And the Gemara explains, although this man performed an act that violated a prohibition that applies by rabbinic law, i.e., he did not have licentious sexual relations with her, but rather engaged in intercourse for the purpose of betrothal, which is in violation of a rabbinic prohibition that one may not betroth a woman by sexual intercourse ab initio, even so, Rabbi Akiva penalizes him. And the Mishnah taught the case of one who stole as to convey to you the far-reaching nature of the lenient opinion of Rabbi Tarfon, as although he performed an act that violated a prohibition that applies by Torah law, stealing, nevertheless, Rabbi Tarfon does not penalize him and make him pay everybody the amount that they claim he stole from them. And that concludes our discussion of Mishnah number 8. We're actually well into the B side of 118 now. And now we get to Mishnah number 9, the final Mishnah of chapter 15. And this is the one we referred to in Mishnah number 7 on the A side of our page. Mishnah number 9, in the case of a woman who went, she and her husband, overseas, and her son was with them, right? So this tragic family trip, first it was just the husband went. That was back in chapter 10. And then at the beginning of this chapter, the husband and the wife went. Okay. Now here in Mishnah number 9, the final Mishnah, the husband and the wife and the child all went on the journey, and only the wife returns. So the women, in the case of a woman who went, she and her husband overseas, and her son was with them. And later she came back and she said, my husband died, and afterward my son died. So she is deemed credible. What does it mean that her husband died and then her son died? It means that at the time her husband died, he had a child. So he did not die childless. That means she is fully free to remarry. There is no yibum obligation if the husband also left a brother when he was childless. So neither yibum nor chalitza applies. When he died, he had a child. The child died after he died. This woman is free to remarry based on her own testimony. She is deemed credible. It is permitted for her to remarry, and she is exempt from yibum. The reason is that she had children when she left on the journey. So her presumptive status when she comes back and says that her husband died is that when he died, he had a child. However, if she comes back and she says, my son died, and afterward my husband died, she is not deemed credible, i.e. she may not enter into yibum. Why? Because when she left, there was a child. So we are going to deem this testimony of this single witness, who is even the wife herself, in order to protect her from becoming a stranded wife waiting for a husband who will never return so she can remarry. But to say that we're going to believe her testimony that her child died first, which then creates a yibum obligation, but also the sort of leniency of it is that it makes her permitted to her brother-in-law, which she would not otherwise be. So, but testifying not with regard to the death of her husband, but rather with regard to the death of her son, a single witness who's also involved and therefore biased, that we don't accept. So what we're really doing is saying that she gets treated, we believe her testimony with respect to her husband, and with respect to the child, we use the presumptive status of that child as it was when they left on the trip. And yet, we are concerned that she might be telling the truth, and we give some credence to her statement. So in case she was actually widowed by a childless husband, therefore, she's not permitted to perform yibum based on this testimony, but we do make her perform chalitza if there's a brother, to exempt her from the levered bond with her yavam. She may not enter into yibum, but she will perform chalitza just to be sure that she's free of the levered bond. If she went on a journey with her childless husband and she returned alone and she said, while we were overseas, a son was born to me. And she further said, my son died, and afterward my husband died, she is deemed credible. Right? Because at the time her husband died, she's saying the child which had been born also died. So that means that her husband, when he died, had the same presumptive status of being childless as he had when they left on the journey. So that makes sense. However, if she said, we went overseas, and my son was born to me while we were overseas, and my husband died, and afterward my son died, then she is not deemed credible for the purposes of exempting her from levirate marriage. But the court is concerned that her statement might be true, so she must perform chalitza if there's a brother-in-law, but no yibum. If she said, a yavam was born for me overseas, right? She's saying that while they were abroad, I guess she was traveling with her husband and his parents, her in-laws, and they had another child. So that the husband, while they were away, her husband had a new brother, right? And then the husband died. So at the time that he died, he had a surviving brother. He might be young, but he's the Yavam of this widow. And then she also said that my husband died, and afterward my Yavam died, or my Yavam died, and afterward my husband died. In either case, she is deemed credible. And this is because when she left, she was presumed not to require levirate marriage because at that time her husband had no brother. So when she returns, and now she's saying, well, there was a brother born overseas, but he's gone, so she's credible. However, if she went, she and her husband and her Yavam, so at the time that they left on the journey, she had a husband and he had a brother. And then she comes back and she says, my husband died and afterward my Yavam died, or my Yavam died and afterward my husband died. She is not deemed credible. As a woman is not deemed credible if she says, my Yavam died in order that she may marry another man. And she is not deemed credible if she says her sister died in order that she may enter the house of her sister's husband. And a man is not deemed credible if he says, my brother died, so that he may enter into levirate marriage with his brother's wife. And he is not deemed credible when he says that his wife died in order that he may marry his wife's sister. The sages accepted impaired testimony, a single witness testimony, especially from a biased witness, of this kind only for one situation, that a wife should be permitted to remarry, not to establish, she's saying that her husband died. We don't accept this testimony of a single witness to say that her brother-in-law died, or a man saying that his brother died, or that his sister-in-law died, or anything like that. Only a wife saying that her husband died so that she will be free to remarry. That is Mishnah number 9, the Gemara. Rav raised a dilemma before Rav Nachman. In the case of a man who confers possession of a bill of divorce to his wife, i.e., he appoints an agent to take the bill of divorce to his wife when she has a potential Yavam. What is the law if her husband dies before she is divorced? So what's going on, right? A man is going to divorce his wife, but maybe he's traveling, so he can't hand the bill of divorce to his wife. So what does he do? He gives the bill of divorce to an agent who happens to be traveling back to the city where he's from, who's going to hand it to the wife. And while that agent is traveling with the bill of divorce, the husband dies, right? So which did she become? A divorcee who's free to marry anyone she wants, or a widow who has a yibum obligation to marry her brother-in-law or perform chalitza with him? One might say that since she hates her Yavam, she hates her brother-in-law, so receiving the bill of divorce is for her benefit, as this act renders her prohibited to him, and it is a principle that one may act in a person's interest in his absence. If so, as soon as the husband gives the bill of divorce to the agent, she's divorced at that minute, even though she hasn't received it. Why? Because the agent can act both as the agent of the husband and of her. When can you act without somebody's knowledge? If it benefits them. Only if it benefits them. You can't do something without instruction from a person if it harms them in any possible way. But if it's only a benefit to them, then you're allowed to act as an agent for them, because you're acting kind of in loco gratuity. You're acting on their behalf just because they weren't there and they would have wanted to receive the lottery winnings. If they don't receive it on that day, they don't get it. So somebody says, oh, well, I'll receive it for her. Okay, that person is really happy that without appointing the agent stepped up and acted for them. But is it totally for the benefit of this woman if this guy receives her bill of divorce for her? Only if she didn't want to marry the brother-in-law. But if she did have some inkling that she'd like to be married to the brother-in-law because her husband died childless, and she'd like to create an heir in her husband's name, then it's not a benefit to her that this man received the bill of divorce on her behalf, and so it shouldn't be possible. Or perhaps, since she sometimes loves her Yavam, this bill of divorce is to her disadvantage, and one may not act against a person's interest in his absence. Consequently, she is not divorced until the bill of divorce reaches her hand.
So Rav Nachman said to Rabbi that we learned an answer to this dilemma in the Mishnah. And we are concerned about her statement, and she must perform chalitza, and she does not enter into levirate marriage. The Mishnah, our Mishnah, states that the court gives her statement some credence in either case, both when her testimony would exempt her from Yibum and when it would allow her to marry her Yavam. And this indicates that levirate marriage is considered neither in her interest nor a disadvantage for her. Rather, its classification is uncertain. Ravina said to Rava, with regard to one who confers possession of a bill of divorce to his wife through an agent in a situation where there was a quarrel between them, what is the law? The Gemara explains both sides of the question. Since she has a quarrel with him, the bill of divorce might be considered for her benefit. Or, perhaps, her physical comfort is preferable to her, as she prefers to remain married despite the quarrel between her and her husband. So come in here a resolution, as Reish Lakish said, there's a popular idiom among women. It is better to sit as two, tandu, than to sit lonely as a widow, i.e. a woman prefers the companionship of any husband over being alone. And so you can't say that just because a woman was, fighting even constantly with her husband, that she would rather be divorced from him than be his widow. Or rather, that she would rather be divorced from him than married to him. And since you can't assume that it's considered an advantage for her to be divorced, you can't say that when this husband died while the bill of divorce was en route to her, that the one bringing it to her receives it on her behalf, and she was a divorcee and not a widow because the divorce happened before the death of the husband. As soon as he handed it to the agent, like she was divorced from that moment. You can't say that because you can't be sure that she would consider it to her advantage to be divorced, even if she was fighting with her husband. And Abaye said a similar popular expression, one whose husband is small as an ant, she places her seat among the noble women, as she considers herself important merely by virtue of being married. And Rav Papa said a different maxim, one whose husband is a wool comber, nafza, a lowly occupation, she calls him to sit with her at the entrance to the house, to display herself as a married woman. Again, Abaye is saying, no matter what kind of a loser the husband is, the wife is proud to be married, even if he's a loser. And now I'm almost done, so if you have questions or comments, get them in. This is the last little clause of chapter 15 and of the Gemara of Mishnah number 9. Similarly, Rav Ashi said, one whose husband sells cabbage heads does not require lentils for her pot. She is so happy that she is married, she doesn't mind even if he does not provide her with food. And the Gemara comments, a sage taught, and all these women who appear so satisfied with their marriages to losers, they all commit adultery and attribute the children to their husbands. Right? They don't want to have to be stuck with, children that, they got stuck being married to a loser. They'd rather not, use his genes to produce a child. So they commit adultery, but attribute the children to the husband so that he wouldn't be a mamzer, and if they get away with it. This is obviously an incredibly cynical viewpoint from a very patriarchal system, and it is not in any way meant to be some kind of sweeping generalization that is true. And this is another reason why they are so keen to be married, and this shows that even when there are quarrels between a couple, the wife still prefers the status of a married woman, and therefore, the point being that the bill of divorce is not considered necessarily in her interest, and we cannot say that she was divorced as of the moment the husband died. The husband handed the bill of divorce to the messenger. We can't say that the messenger is deemed her agent to receive the divorce for her. So if the husband died before she received the divorce document, she is a widow and not a divorcee. And that concludes the Gemara Mishnah number 9 and chapter 15. So when we reconvene on Tuesday, because there's no class tomorrow, the 4th of July, we have a family commitment. So I'll see you, God willing, on Tuesday at the regular time, 6 p.m. Pacific. And then, God willing, we'll do a double daf as we open chapter 16, the final chapter of this tractate. And if we do the double daf on Tuesday, or Wednesday for that matter, that'll put us on schedule to make a siyum and complete the tractate on Thursday when we do page 122, the final page of tractate Yevamos. Okay, let's see if there's questions or comments. Ira. In Ruth, the book of Ruth, all the husbands died, and Ruth was allowed to marry Boaz. Isn't it an issue that Ruth isn't Jewish? How do you know Ruth isn't Jewish? We don't have any evidence of that. We know that she was born in Moab, so she's Ruth the Moabite. But Naomi's son married Ruth. And the sages take that to mean that Ruth is a Geras, that she made a conversion, because whereas the Torah says that a Moabite man cannot convert to Judaism, no such law for the Moabite woman, as we've seen. Correction. He said, wasn't it an issue? I'm sorry, Nina's correcting me. He said, wasn't it an issue that she wasn't born Jewish? Is a convert obligated for Yibum when she was married? Have we made a distinction that only a woman who was born Jewish is obligated in Yibum? I am not sure. I am not sure. There was some laws that applied. That certain people can only marry, marry into the congregation, which means marry somebody who was born a Jew. But I'm not sure that we've established that a woman who's a convert is not obligated in Yibum. I'm just not sure. When she was married to her husband, she wasn't Jewish? What do you mean when she was married to her husband, she wasn't Jewish? I don't think we have evidence of that. I think that she was Jewish. I think we consider Ruth to be Jewish when she was married to her husband, to Naomi's son. And now, did Boaz perform Yibum? No, right? Boaz was not the brother of that man who died. He was a kinsman. He was some kind of fairly close kinsman, but was not the brother. So it wasn't exactly Yibum, according to Torah law, that was being performed in the book of Ruth. But there was also some kind of customs of the time that were being observed there as well. Tom, if he gives them all bills of divorce, I assume we're talking about this case of the man who's betrothed to one of 5 women and he's not sure which. When he comes back, he doesn't want to marry the one he wasn't betrothed to, and now he doesn't want to marry any of them that they're all claiming they're betrothed to him. So he doesn't want to marry any of them. So he's going to give them each a bill of divorce, and he's going to, according to Rabbi Tarfon, which is the law, leave the marriage settlement, the ketubah payment, there, and the 5 of them who all claim that they were betrothed to him, they can work it out. So Tom asks, if he gives them all bills of divorce, can he later change his mind and marry one of them? That's a great question, and I'm not sure. My sense is, no way. Wait a minute. I take that back. Why not? Right? If he gives them each a bill of divorce, and after receiving the bill of divorce from him, they weren't with some other man, then maybe he could marry one of them at that point, right? You can marry and divorce a woman, and then marry her again, so long as she didn't have sexual relations with any other man while she was divorced from you. As long as that didn't happen, then she can come back and marry you. So yeah, why not? Great question. I think that would be I think that would be a possibility. And Tom also asks, if they have sex, aren't they married? Right. So we saw that in this tractate. You can create betrothal by having sexual intercourse, but the 2 partners have to intend to create betrothal through sexual intercourse for it to be a betrothal. If they don't intend that, if they're just having licentious sex, so they would be subject to lashes for that. They definitely committed a transgression, but they don't necessarily create a betrothal unless that was their intention. By rabbinic law, even with the intention to create a betrothal, it is an inappropriate form of action because it is, has the smell of licentiousness. But according to Torah law, it would be sufficient, but only with intent. Without the intent, it's just, slutty behavior and a transgression. Okay, that's what we've got today. So with God's help, we'll be together again on Tuesday, not tomorrow, the 4th of July, but on Tuesday at the regular time, 6 p.m. Pacific, and hopefully we'll do a double daf on that day. That is the plan. Have a beautiful 4th of July. Remember to thank God and all the men and women who gave, the ultimate sacrifice so that we could enjoy the freedoms of this country. And check out that song that I played at the beginning, the Battle Hymn of the Republic by Dave Alvin. You can Google that on YouTube. And I made it and I paired it with vintage photographs from the Civil War. I think it's pretty moving. And Dave performed that song for our movie, Saving Lincoln. And I got to say, that would be a great thing to do on the 4th of July, is to watch Saving Lincoln, which Nina and I wrote and I directed, and which is available on Prime and Apple.